I think I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting. We still have 12 attendees. Nobody else has jumped on. Uh, for those of you who might not know me, I'm David Solomon. I'm the city engineer. And our engineering department is managing the Timberbrook project. I'm going to start with making a few introductions of our panelists. From city staff, we have, of course, myself. We have Mary Ayala. She's our project manager for Timberbrook. Most of you are probably familiar with Mary. She's out there quite often. We have our director of finance, Dave Erb, on the call, as well as our purchasing manager, Tracy Ogurick. And we have Sid Abella here this evening. He's temporarily the construction inspector for the Timberbrook project. Most of you are probably familiar with Chris Lee, and he's out on leave right now, and Sid has been watching the Timberbrook project in Chris's absence. From DDM, we have Zach Marquardt and Matthew Bartos. And so anyway, those are the, we were expecting maybe a couple more folks, panelists, but we're going to move on anyway. Just a few housekeeping items. The meeting is being recorded. The first two meetings, we had some difficulty with recording function. So we actually have one of our panelists that I forgot to mention is Tarina Morris, and she's with our IT department, and she won't be participating, so to speak, but she's on the call just to bail us out if we have any technical issues. And I think she's making sure that this is being recorded properly. We're
David,
hoping, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We do have Dave Marquardt. He's on one of the phone numbers, and Jeff, who is also, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce Jeff's last name. He's one of the other project managers associated with the project on DDM's.
Okay. So, anyway, we're hoping, we'll stay on the meeting as long as we need to answer questions and address comments, within reason. But we really hope that we'll be finished by 7:30. Some of you have been on these before or other Zoom meetings, so you're probably familiar with the way it works. But I have the ability to allow people to speak and then to mute them when they're finished. So that's what I'll be doing. Those that wish to speak, once we get to those who wish to speak, there's a little hand button on the screen. You should be able to, down at the lower side of the screen, there's a hand. If you wish to speak, you have to hit that hand button, and then that lets me know that you've got something that you want to say or a question to ask. And then when we get to that point where we're going to be doing questions and answers and discussion, I'll just go down the line of all the people that want to speak, and we'll kind of go through them one by one in the order that they're, showing up. Once we finish discussing the topic that you raised your hand for, then of course I'm going to mute you, and then we'll move on to the next person. And then of course, if you think of something else you want to ask, just raise your hand again, and then we'll get back around to you. Another way that you can communicate with us if you don't wish to speak is the Q&A feature here on the Zoom meeting. Also down at the bottom of your screen, there should be a button that says Q&A. And if you hit that button, you should be able to type into a box any questions or comments you have. What we've been doing on the other meetings, and we'll do it the same way tonight, is once I get done addressing all the verbal comments and questions, then we'll kind of go through the typed questions and comments and address those as best as we can. We'll try to address your comments and questions as best as we can this evening. If some of you have issues that require additional attention, we'll make either arrangements to come out and look at it or make arrangements to give you a call later and discuss it in more detail if it's something that we can't solve tonight. As far as just a few guidelines for speaking, we only have 12 attendees this evening as opposed to the 30 and 40 that we've had in the past, so there may not be an issue, but try to keep your comments and questions concise so that we can answer them and move on relatively quickly. And try not to reiterate comments and questions that other people have because we'll just be answering the same question again. So anyway, just keep those things in mind. Just like our city council meetings, foul language, name calling, monopolizing time on a single topic is something that we don't tolerate. So if any of that stuff starts to happen, then I'm gonna mute the speaker. So just keep that in mind as well. So we're going to do something a little bit different this time than we've done in the past two meetings. There's a number of topics and issues that have come up repeatedly through the construction process. And so I'm going to try to cover those 5 or 6 issues and try to explain what the city's position are on those issues and our processes and procedures as best as I can up front before we get to the comment, question and answer session. So that maybe it'll help answer some of those questions right up front. And I want to start this evening with our Finance Director, Dave Erb, and Tracy Ogurek. So what I would like them to do, we've had a lot of comments and questions regarding the procurement process for our construction projects. And Tracy and Dave are really kind of in charge of that piece of what we do here at the city. And so I want Dave to briefly explain how the state law affects the way that cities here in Texas are allowed to procure these type of services, public works contractors. So Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you for a few minutes.
Thanks, David. Welcome, everyone. Happy to be here. Again, as David mentioned, I'm David Erb. I'm the Director of Finance, and across the table from me is Tracy Ogurek. She's our Purchasing Manager. Just a couple of comments, and I'm going to have her kind of wrap up the discussion on the procurement because she's actually the resident expert. But I'll just tell you that the city has policies and directives that guides our purchasing and our purchasing efforts. And those are all stipulated and based on state statutes. Those are very specific rules and guidance that we have to follow in selecting vendors. And that goes for any kind of construction type project. There's a number of reasons why we have these things in place. One is we need to make sure that it's a fair and equitable process, that anybody that's interested in bidding for that work is able to do that. And then there has to be a fair and equitable way to evaluate those proposals. It also allows us to be good stewards of the tax dollars that we're entrusted with. We want to make sure that we're getting the best value and the best quality that we can through a process. So by following those policies and directives and in compliance with state statutes, that's how we kind of handle the procurement process. Now, one of the things that state statutes does is it definitely limits the amount of latitude that we have so that it prevents any kind of inequities to kind of slip into the process. So, we think that we are in compliance with state statutes. We think our policies and directives give us the best opportunity to select the best vendors for the project that we have. And it was no different for this project as well. In the process of selecting DDM, we followed those steps. And I'm just going to turn it over to Tracy real quick, just to kind of walk through just a couple of things that we did in evaluating and just getting to where we're at right now.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to walk through a little bit. Dave talked about state statutes, and what we have is we have Texas Local Government Code 252, which is for the competitive requirements for purchases. For public work projects specifically, it states that we must award the contract by lowest responsible bidder. The definition of lowest responsible bidder is the bidder who fully complies with all the bid requirements and whose past performance, reputation, and financial capability is deemed acceptable, and who has offered the most advantageous pricing to the city. There's a whole formal process that we have to go through for the bidding process. It starts with advertising, and we post all of our bids on an electronic format platform. And then it's required to be out there for a number of days, at least 21 days from advertisement. Usually we have them out there for 28 days. Once we receive the bids, all bids are sealed. So they're either sealed in that electronic platform or we'll receive in paper copies that are sealed. But then we open those up. And so we only have those vendors that provide bids, but it's a public announcement and it goes out to thousands of vendors when we list those bid opportunities out there. But when we're opening those bid packets, what we're doing is we're going to take that lowest responsible bidder and we're going to do our due diligence at that time. And one of the requirements is a bid bond. The bid bond is actually like an insurance agreement between the contractor and an insurance agent. And they are, it's a third party and they're insuring the liability and guaranteeing us that the bidder is capable of completing this project for us. And if that, for some reason, that doesn't happen, the contractor can't, the surety company steps in and makes sure that that project is completed. So, but I want to assure you that when we receive those bids that we're doing our due diligence and we're looking at the references and past performances and we're looking at the safety records. So that is really what the process is. So whoever has the best, lowest responsible requirements, that is who we usually award the contract to. I just want to follow up and see if David Solomon, if you have any additional information that you want to add to that.
Well, not a lot. Thank you, guys. Yeah, as Tracy said, when we open these bids, and actually they're opened by the purchasing division, and Mary and I were sitting in there when they were opened. We immediately go to work, following up on references. Of course, the contractor typically provides references, and we follow up on them. And we go even further than that. We do some digging, and we actually, even in this case, we found some cities that we didn't have references for from DDM, and we talked to cities that DDM has done work for that they didn't provide the reference for. And so we even went beyond what we normally do and really dug down and did our own work trying to figure out other cities that have had DDM do work in their cities. So going through all that, we really did not receive any negative comments. There was no cause for alarm. There's no reason to believe that DDM was not going to be able to perform the project. And as Tracy said, they were obviously, DDM is financially stable enough to procure a bond. So, and that bond protects us. So even from a financial standpoint, there was no reason to be worried about hiring DDM to complete this project. And so that's what we've done. I don't know, is that all? Was there anything else, Tracy or David?
I don't have any additional information at this time.
I don't want to keep Tracy and David here all evening. So, and if somebody, if one of the attendees has a specific question with regard to our purchasing processes for public works contracts, now would be the time to raise your hand, and we can try to answer those questions up front here while Tracy and Dave are still here. Otherwise, if there are no questions on this particular topic or comments, then I'm going to let them go, and then they can go home for the evening. So,
David, if there is a question that comes up later and they're not here, I can relay it to them and we can get it answered.
Right. Yeah. If you think of something, or if something comes up later, we'll still get the question answered, but you may have to wait on an answer. If that's fine. Okay, well, I think we're going to let David and Tracy go then, and we'll move on to the next topic.
Thanks, guys.
There's been some question amongst some of the residents about what constitutes a substantially complete street. Obviously, everyone knows that, complete means complete, which means 100% complete and everything is finished. We use the words substantially complete quite a bit. And on a street project like this, when we say substantially complete, in terms of percentage, in my mind, that's probably about 90%. Complete. From a more visual way to say this would be that in our minds, a substantially complete street is a street where both lanes of pavement have been completed, they're drivable, the street is open to traffic. The sidewalk has been completed on at least one side of the street. The contractor might be working on the sidewalk on the second side of the street, but they're working on the sidewalk on the last side, and they probably have some cleanup items to do. There may be a few construction materials still stored on the street. There's probably some sodding and irrigation system work that still needs to be done. There may be some silt in the street yet, or something like that. So that's what we call substantially complete. And I guess the reason that's important in this conversation is because we've told DDM that they can only have two streets working at one time, and they cannot start another street until one of those two streets has been substantially completed. So, and we'll get into this a little bit further into the meeting, but, as most of we're working on Mockingbird and Hollyoak. Hollyoak is getting fairly close to being substantially complete. It's not quite there yet. But once Hollyoak is substantially complete, meaning roughly 90% complete, we're going to allow them to start a new street. So I just wanted to explain that terminology, maybe take some of the confusion out of it. Another issue that's kind of high on everybody's priority list is street sweeping and dust control. And at this point, I would like Matt Barnos from DDM to kind of jump in here and explain what their processes are for that.
All right, perfect. So we have definitely heard from a lot of residents out there about the street sweeping, the dust and everything like that. During the summer months, it becomes very difficult to have 100% mitigation in dust. So what we've done, we've been running the water truck consistently, trying to build somewhat of a crust on that dirt. However, as it gets traveled on by the loaders and the equipment and everything like that, it just stirs it right back up. We're also doing street sweeping, stuff like that, trying to get as much off those roads as we can. It's a construction site. When the storm sewer goes down the middle, unfortunately, that road gets limited, and that really creates a lot of issues regarding dust and debris and stuff like that. The other thing that we've asked and that we're implementing with our employees is minimizing travel on the streets. That, for instance, like Mockingbird, trying to minimize their travel back and forth on that, really leaving it only to our superintendents to travel back and forth, and obviously the equipment, but having everybody park their vehicles and walk to where they need to go, or get in one vehicle and use that one vehicle. That way we don't have 7 vehicles running up and down that road. We try our best to do that. Not all the time is it feasible, but that's what we've done. We've also asked them to go below the speed limit as well, to minimize the dust that they do kick up. We try to tell, I've asked them to keep it below 15 to 10 miles an hour. Again, it's not law that they do it, but they understand the amount of pressure that we are getting with the dust. So those are some of the things we are doing to try and minimize the amount of dust in the air. Is it perfect? No, not by any means, but it's what we have available. That's I'm trying to think of the right word. That is practical, because again, it is a construction site on these streets we are working on. We run our water truck. We do everything that is required environmentally to minimize the dust. But again, during the summer months, unfortunately, it does it kicks up a little bit. But we're doing all we can to keep the traffic at a minimum, at least by our people. So that's basically what we are up to.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I wanted to add to that. Obviously Timberbrook is a large project and it's a little bit spread out. One of the things we've done out here at Timberbrook is we've assigned an inspector exclusively to this project. I've been here in working for the city of Louisville for 16 years, and this is the first project that I'm aware of that we've actually assigned an inspector just to one project to literally be camped out at that project. So, I mean, we are taking this very seriously. I know we had a few we had more problems at the beginning of the project with this dust issue. We've really made a concerted effort to really stay on top of it. I think we're getting fewer complaints about dust. We're still getting some. But I want to assure you that the inspector is authorized, if he sees something happening, if they haven't watered, or they're running the sweeper without water, or they're doing saw cutting without water, or whatever the case may be, if the workers out there are creating a cloud of dust needlessly, our inspectors have the ability to shut them down, and they have. Now, they might not see it immediately when it first starts happening. Chris Lee may be down at one end of the street and maybe the dust problem is down at the other end. But as soon as Chris sees what's going on and he notices there's a problem, he does shut them down until they can fix the problem. So we are taking this dust control issue seriously. The next topic I wanted to cover was retaining walls. We've had a few comments with regard to the retaining walls. And of course, Timberbrook is a subdivision that has a lot of retaining walls, existing. Some of them are timber. I think there's a combination of types of walls out there. There's timber walls. I think there's some concrete walls. There's some of those modular block unit stackable walls. And then there's also just actually some stone, custom stone walls out there, more decorative. And so in a lot of cases, those walls, if they're far enough back away from the sidewalk, we try to avoid doing anything with them at all unless they're in danger of collapsing. And there's a few of those out there that are pushed far enough back that we don't have to mess with them. But the majority of the walls out there are actually right up behind the sidewalk. And so those are the walls that are being replaced. I wanted to go over how the city is handling the different varieties of retaining walls. If somebody has an existing timber or concrete retaining wall, that retaining wall will be replaced with concrete. As a matter of fact, the city of Louisville doesn't even permit timber retaining walls anymore over a certain, I think it's either over 3 feet or 4 feet. So anytime we encounter one of those old timber retaining walls, we're replacing that with concrete. And of course, if they're concrete to begin with, we're replacing them with concrete. On those stackable modular units, what we're doing is we're disassembling those, storing the material back away from the project area, and then we're restacking those. As I mentioned, there's some people out in Timberbrook that have more of a decorative stone type wall. Those are a little bit more difficult for us. We're doing our best to not disturb them, or if we do disturb them and cause some sort of damage, we're going to try to repair the damage with the existing materials if we can. If the damage, if the walls are damaged, or for some reason we can't save it, the owner also has ability to request a plain concrete wall in its place as well. So there are those options. There are some existing retaining walls out there in Timberbrook that are very short behind the sidewalk, and some of these are existing. There's some places in Timberbrook that have walls that are less than a foot tall behind the sidewalk, and there again we're giving homeowners the option. We can either go back and put in concrete, or if they don't want the wall at all, if they want to do away with the wall, we will slope their front yard back if we can. Sometimes it's not possible, but sometimes it's possible to slope the yard back, and in those cases, we're going to disturb sod and sometimes irrigation systems, and so we do replace the sod and we do replace or repair the irrigation systems if we have to when we slope the yards back and then do away with those walls. some of the comments we've received, one of the things we're doing in Timberbrook, and we can't really avoid it, Timberbrook subdivision was built back in the 70s, and of course that was way before the Americans with Disabilities Act. Frankly, none of the sidewalks out there were ADA compliant. We were fine as long as those sidewalks were in place, they were grandfathered in, but now that we've touched them, we have to make them all ADA compliant. So you'll notice in many cases, those sidewalks are wider than they were before. We're trying to do 5-foot sidewalks as opposed to the 4-foot sidewalks that were out there. Of course, we have to build ADA compliant ramps, and that's completely different than it was years ago. And those ramps take up more room than the old style ramps used to. The other thing we have to be mindful of is the slope on the sidewalk. We cannot have we have to have a relatively flat slope crossways on the sidewalk from front to back. It can have very, very little slope. And even the running slope cannot exceed the slope of the street. So, trying to make all that mesh together with the additional foot width and sidewalk sometimes makes it impossible for the contractor to put that sidewalk in and actually match the grade on the front yard in front of any particular resident's home. So when that happens, sometimes we do have to put in a low retaining wall, or again, we give that homeowner the opportunity to have their yard sloped back if that's physically possible. But we're trying to make individual property owners happy with what they've got in front of their homes. And so we give them those options. Obviously, the city doesn't want to build any more retaining walls than we really need to. So, and even the sloping back, I mean, if we don't put in a retaining wall, we have to slope the yard back. It's still costs the city money to do that because we still have to buy sod, we have to adjust irrigation systems. There's some costs associated with that as well. So, we're doing whatever we can to make these sidewalks match the grade at the property line. But when we can't, we have to use one of these two measures. One thing we're not going to do is put a sidewalk in that does not meet the requirements of the ADA. There's been some concerns about construction vehicle safety and then maintenance and operations. I know at the beginning of the project, we had a vehicle or two out there that the backup warning lights and the beeper wasn't working. And I think that's been resolved. I don't know that we've had that issue since the beginning of the project, so we solved that. I know we've had a few vehicles out there. I think we had one a while back where somebody, one of the truck drivers' trailer brakes was set wrong, and it was causing the tires to lock up, and somebody noticed that, and as soon as the city was aware of that, we contacted the contractor, and they got that resolved, that day, and got their trailer brakes adjusted appropriately. Same thing. I think we've had a few vehicles out there that had some broken tail lights or tail lights that were burned out or something, and then DDM has repaired and addressed those issues as well. So all that being said, when we do notice these things happening, we do contact DDM, and if we see them, if Chris Lee or Sid or Mary see something like that going on, we immediately contact DDM. If we get a call from a citizen or a resident out there, we immediately call DDM and try to find out what's going on out there if we can identify the piece of equipment. So, if you see something like that going on, please give Mary, myself, or get a hold of the inspector, and we'll try to get on it as quickly as possible. I know there's been a lot of comment out there about vehicle drivers and equipment operators playing on their cell phones or looking at their cell phones. You know, that's one of those things that it's really an enforcement issue. You know, Chris Lee can't be everywhere at one time out there in Timberbrook, no more than anybody else can. So, you know, when he sees something like that going on, you know, he'll stop it. But he has to be there to see it. You know, if a resident calls me and says, well, I just saw a DDM truck driving down the street and then the driver was looking at his cell phone. Well, by the time I contact DDM, you know, that driver is either not there anymore or he's not looking at his cell phone anymore. And so if we can identify the truck, you know, we'll point it out to DDM. But the best thing is when Chris can actually catch them in the act. I think the last topic I wanted to cover was material storage in the Parkway. We've had a few people comment about that. DDM has their storage yard down there on Live Oak near Walnut. And, you know, that's where they store the majority of their equipment on site, or equipment, I mean, their materials are on site. But we do allow, and it's not just DDM, all of our contractors have the ability to store materials that they need that day on the street that they're working on. So for instance, Mockingbird and Hollyoak, you know, there's probably materials stored in the Parkway behind the curb in front of people's houses. And frankly, you know, that provides for a much more efficient process during the day as they're working on those streets. Sometimes we let them, for instance, I think they've got some materials stored on Mockingbird. Of course, those materials are probably being used, Magnolia. Those materials stored on Magnolia are probably being used on Mockingbird, and so they want those materials close by so they're not traipsing all the way back through the subdivision over to Live Oak and Walnut to get materials, then have to turn around and bring them all the way back over to the west end of Mockingbird. So there is some method to that madness, and so you know, once those streets get to a point where they're substantially completed, as I mentioned earlier, then you should see those materials start to disappear. And frankly, that's in the contractor's best interest also, because once they come, those streets are still the contractors to maintain until we accept the project at the end. So, you know, DDM is probably not going to be storing a lot of materials on streets that they've already completed, because if they go in there to get those materials and they cause damage to the street or the sidewalk or the curb, they're still liable to fix it. So I think once we see, if you've had materials sitting on your street for a while, I would have to assume those streets are probably still being worked on. And once we get to that substantial completion point, you should see those start to disappear. So with that, I'm going to get to our schedule. I know people are always interested in where we are with the schedule and what's coming up next. Covering some of the streets that have already been finished or are substantially complete, our Sweet Gum Drive. We still have a few minor cleanup issues and punch list items that need to be completed on Sweet Gum, but for the most part, it is finished. I will say on Sweet Gum, if there's anybody here that's living on Sweet Gum, we do have to go back and add 2 more handicap ramps. Admittedly, the plans that our engineering consultants prepared were incorrect. And there was 2 ramps that should have been added to the project that weren't, and so we're going to have to go back and add those 2 ramps, and those ramps are required by the ADA. Walnut Drive, Live Oak, and Thrush Court are all substantially complete. Again, There are cleanup items that need to be done out there on those before the end of the project, and we're aware of that. They're not complete, but they're close. Hollyoak Drive is still under construction. As I mentioned earlier, it's getting close to being substantially complete, but it's not yet. Of course, the recent rains we've had this week will probably slow that down a little bit. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of our process is that concrete is extremely difficult to get right now. And so that is also causing some delay. The materials that are used to make concrete are in short supply and high demand. And so DDM is not getting their concrete deliveries as quickly and as often as they would like. And every contractor in the Metroplex is having that same issue. Hollyoak Drive is expected to be substantially complete by the end of this month. Again, that's our estimate. I mean, it looks like that might happen, and so unless something happens that we're not expecting, I would expect to be substantially complete with Hollyoak by the end of this month. I'm sorry, September. I was saying August, September. So we're looking probably toward the middle of September, maybe the end of September for substantial completion. Mockingbird Drive, they're still working on the water line, so that one's going to be a little bit longer. Of course, that street started after Hollyoak, so that's to be expected. We're having some trouble with the water line on Mockingbird, getting that to pass inspection with regard to bacteria. Have we resolved that?
It's Hollyoak. Hollyoak is finished through. We're just doing our back tees on that one.
Okay.
Mockingbird, we're still in the process.
Okay. Yeah. So Mockingbird, they're still installing the water line. Hollyoak is a street we're having a little bit of trouble getting the bacteria tests to come back clean. So we're working on trying to make sure that water line is completely disinfected before we finish up Hollyoak. And then, of course, Mockingbird is behind that. So anyway, where we're going next, once we get Hollyoak to the point where it's substantially complete, then we will be moving on to Red Wing. So we would expect Red Wing to start sometime in maybe mid to late September. Is that about right? Close enough. So, and again, all this stuff is dependent on weather and concrete deliveries, and there's probably a dozen different factors that go into when we're able to get these streets completed. But barring anything unusual, that's the time frame we would be expecting. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and Mary, is there anything else? Did I miss anything that I should have mentioned? Or Matt, is there anything else that? If not, at this point, we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions, comments. And again, I'll start. Anybody that has their hand raised, we'll cover those first, and then we'll go to the Q&A box, the typed comments once we finish up with the verbal questions and comments. The first hand raised here looks like it's Terry. I'm going to unmute you. Okay, Terry, you should be able to speak. You'll have to turn your mic on, though.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I have a two-part question. Down the end of Red Wing, between Red Wing and Thrush Court, they put a storm drain in the alleyway. I was told that was to catch runoff water coming down the alleyway. I don't ever see any water going into that storm drain. It runs right down the middle of the alley and out into the street and catches storm drain out there.
In the alley.
So, did they do this down every alleyway, or is it just between Red Wing and Thrush Court? Yes.
Okay.
And it's at 701 Thrush Court. It backs up against his property.
Okay.
And the second part of the question is they've got a metal grate out over the top of this that it's kind of wonky, and if you get anywhere near
Terry, are you we seem to have lost your audio.
Okay.
I can hear you again.
And the metal grate sits wonky, so the metal pieces are sticking up. And if you drive too close to it, you could damage a tire. Is that ever going to get removed, the metal grating they've got over this storm drain?
Well, I think Mary might be able to answer the question about why that storm drain is there. And either Mary or Matt is probably going to be able to answer when that metal grate can be addressed. Matt,
Terry, are we looking at the one that's near Live Oak Court, or is there a different?
It's on Live Oak, and if you were to go, you see the Thrush Court cul-de-sac, and if you were to pass that and go right up the next alleyway, that's the alleyway before you hit Red Wing.
It's the first
and
alleyway.
It's really
Okay. Based on the engineering plans, hang on, I have to go. Usually the consultant places the inlets where the bulk of the water is passing by, and the inlet's supposed to catch it. So my assumption is that it was needed. I can further investigate it and then get back with you, Terry.
okay. The major thing is that metal grate over the storm drain. I mean, you can see the bars, the metal bars sticking up and out in different directions, and if somebody just happens to turn the wrong way coming in or out of the alley, they're going to hit that and they're going to damage the tire.
I think, are you talking, and it has like the black fabric on it? Is that what you're talking about? As you
I don't even know if it's got black fabric on it. All I've seen is the metal bars. Now maybe there's black fabric underneath it.
Are you talking, so does it bend over the curb kind of like in a chair shape, or is it actually in the pavement? Okay, so what that is, that's storm inlet protection. What DCEQ requires us to have that in place in order to minimize the amount of debris that gets into that line. I can go ahead and remove that alley because we do have it sodded, but we are required to have that over inlets until grass is established. That is a requirement for us per our stormwater program.
Okay.
But I can have that inlet protection picked up now that we have grass established in that area. We don't have any construction going upstream or downstream from it, so it won't collect any dirt, but I can get that picked up. That's no problem.
Okay, good. It's good to know. Thank you.
And of course, I will add, that inlet protection to keep the dirt out of the inlets is kind of a double-edged sword because it keeps the dirt out, but it keeps most of the water out of the inlets too. So the inlet really isn't doing its job. So I would have to assume that once that's been removed, all that grading in front of the inlet, that hopefully the water is going to go in there.
Well, when I've seen it raining this past week, it just runs right down the middle of the alley. It doesn't go over to that side where the storm drain is at. And I see it go out and it hangs a right-hand turn because it's starting to go downhill a little bit there going towards Red Wing. And it goes all into that storm drain out on Live Oak. And it bypasses the one in the alley.
Yeah, okay, well, that obviously doesn't make sense. So Mary and I will both look at that.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to, looks like JL is next. Okay, JL, you're able to speak, so go ahead.
I've got several questions, and the first ones are there are several questions together, and then I've got more questions besides this. The question is, are they going to separate Red Wing into two sections, Live Oak to Magnolia, Magnolia to Timberbrook? The request is to obviously finish Mockingbird before you start Red Wing, and because there's a big parking issue. Where are the people on Red Wing and Mockingbird going to park if you've got Red Wing torn up and Mockingbird at the same time? I've got some other questions besides these, but I'll start with those and then I can move on to the next questions.
Well, my understanding is that we will work Red Wing from Live Oak to Timberbrook as we have the other streets. So it looks like Matt is shaking his head, yes.
Yeah, that's correct.
So where's everybody supposed to park? That when you have
we'll have that other lane of traffic on Mockingbird, so everybody's going to have to park on Mockingbird at that point. It's no different than Mockingbird is parking up on Red Wing right now. The people on Red Wing will have to park on Mockingbird.
Right, but Mockingbird's not done, and it's not going to be substantially complete when you start Red Wing. Hollyoak will be, but not Mockingbird.
Well, see, and we've switched some stuff up because we do recognize that we have to address the parking on Red Wing, on Red Wing. So we're probably going to pour all of Mockingbird together and get that done, so we can switch Red Wing over to Mockingbird and then jump on Hollyoak. We are mobilizing multiple crews on the concrete. Again, with what he said about shortages on concrete and everything like that, we're ready to go. We have everything ready to go. We have manpower, equipment, everything like that. It's just strictly a supply issue. And once we have things locked in on that and we have confirmations from our suppliers, we have the manpower to get both streets banged out very quickly. So I'm well aware that we have to supply parking on Red Wing, and the plan will be to move them over to Mockingbird and have them park on Mockingbird.
And then a couple other things that I had was in regards to the safety procedures. I heard what, David said about, calling or having Chris, whatever. I mean, the bottom line is DDM should be inspecting their vehicles every day before they drive them. City employees are not allowed to get away with this. So I don't understand why DDM is allowed to just jump in a vehicle and drive it however they choose to. I've seen stuff all the time with these vehicles, again, because I'm right in the center. So I see all these different things. That's one of the things they should be inspecting their vehicles prior to driving them. And then the other thing is in regards to the dirt, the water truck isn't over here that often. The other day, the water truck was shooting its water into my neighbor's pool over his fence and watering the rock that's on Magnolia. And and he didn't appear to know how to drive that vehicle. He was out there grinding the gears. I talked to Chris about it. I don't know if they ever figured out who it was. But yeah, he was watering my neighbor's pool over his fence with the water truck. So that's where the water was going, not on the dirt. And then in regards to, the sweeper, the red one and the orange one, those are totally worthless. They create the dust clouds. The green one worked well. But for some reason, DDM will not bring back the green one or will not rent one like the green one, but instead rent an orange one that's like the red one. It just slings it in the air. And, you know, we've submitted video after video after video, and, you know, it gets nowhere. We're just beating our head against the wall in regards to the dirt. And, you know, Matt's comment about, well, it's a construction site. Well, you may view it as a construction site, but we live here. This is our homes. We have to view this as a residential area, even though you view it as a construction site. And if you guys viewed it as a residential area, I think that that would change some of the perspective, because we have to breathe the dirt that you guys fling in the air. And there's not being any steps being taken. You know, again, I see this on a daily basis, what goes on out here, because I'm in the center and see way more than I would prefer to see of what goes on.
Well, we are going to continue to, you know, again, you know, we know this is a priority issue. It's been an issue on and off since the beginning of the project. Again, I think DDM is doing a better job than they were at the beginning of the project. Certainly room for improvement. And again, anytime we see those sweepers being used without water, you know, they're being stopped. I can't promise that we've caught it 100% of the time, probably haven't. But anytime that Chris or Sid or Mary has seen them out there running a sweeper without water, they're stopped. You know, and even running those sweepers with water, I mean, there is going to be some debris, as was mentioned earlier, but it shouldn't be the cloud of dust.
Well, if they used the one that was like the green one, it would solve a lot of the problem. And that's what we've been asking for since they used it up on Sweetco. But that's where we keep getting the resistance. But instead of, like I said, they went out and rented that orange one that's like the red one instead of renting the one that's like a green one. The green one actually vacuumed it up.
Well, and my understanding is that type of street sweeper, obviously, if it's vacuuming up the dust, then it has to be emptied. And that type of street sweeper is typically not one that would be used on this large of a construction project. You know, Matt might help, you know, answer this, but that was my understanding is the reason. First of all, that particular sweeper broke down and it was very expensive to repair, and so DDM decided not to repair that sweeper, and that's what I've been told. But frankly, that type of sweeper that has to be emptied constantly is a very time-consuming, labor-intensive kind of thing to do on a subdivision this size. And you know, to be honest about it, the orange sweeper and the red sweeper, when they're working properly with water, is a pretty common sweeper to be using on this type of project. But we've got DDM on the line. We've got the owner and of course Matt, so they're hearing all this, and we are too. So,
well, there's a simple solution, and that's what we've been asking for, and the residents on Sweet Gum asked for it too. So, you know, I mean, everybody keeps saying, well, it's the dirt, and you know, we're the ones that have to live it and breathe it, you know, every single day, and that's the reason why we're making this request. And again, they requested it on Sweet Gum. So this has been going on for almost a year that this request has been made.
Were there any other questions or comments you wanted to make?
No, thank you.
Okay, it looks like our next speaker is Stacy Jerzak and Andy Cobb. I'm gonna. Okay, you can speak. Okay, go ahead. Looks like you've turned on your mic.
Yes, sir. Hey, Good evening. David, I think I spoke with you probably maybe 3 weeks ago. I've had direct communication with Mary as well. My resident is on Hummingbird, and it's a cul-de-sac. I believe the schedule for my street is probably going to be still one of the last streets. This is kind of a 2 or 3 part question. I put off some repairs based on, in the front of the house, obviously, related to some of the feedback from other street people related to vibrations. On the May call, I mentioned as well, my pool repair from the freeze, they won't touch it until this project's done. They can't guarantee that your equipment, based on their information, won't rattle my pool and cause cracks. So I'm kind of putting a lot of things on hold until this is done ultimately. 2 things. My understanding, David, from our conversation is Dove Court was bumped up on your schedule to be done. So I wanted to find out when that is tentatively scheduled. And then is the alley between Hummingbird and Dove Court going to be done as well?
Okay, well, that would be a Mary and Matt question.
Matt, I'm going to have to.
I believe. Oh, go ahead, Mary.
I'm deferring to you.
Okay, perfect. So I believe I had talked to somebody in the neighborhood you had been talking to with regards to your pool. Yeah, you're probably looking around roughly the first of the year, somewhere around there, on your particular street. I do think it is best to wait until we are done and through the area to have your pool repair done, because what will happen is if your pool repair guy does not repair your pool properly and we were out there, he's going to point the finger at us and we'll point the finger at him and you'll be stuck in the middle. It's best just to wait for us to get through. That way he has no out. If his repairs don't work, he has no out not to warranty his work. So with that being said, I know that you probably want to get in your pool and all that stuff, but right now it's probably best just to wait.
I don't have a problem waiting. I just need to plan. I think it's a matter of planning at this point.
I would say till after the first of the year. I would probably say the best, I'd say around January, February, end of January, beginning of February is probably a good timeline. If you need to kind of get in the queue with him, I would go ahead and tell him roughly about that time he should be ready to start his
just to be
work.
Safe, I'll just pad it. I'll pad it a month or 2.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's a project. Things happen. So
yeah, understood. And then the alley you speak of, is that the one coming off of Timberbrook into the back, or is it the one coming off of Magnolia?
It's actually my alley comes off of to Timberbrook. It would be Timberbrook.
So that portion of the alley does not, and Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have my plans in front of me, but that portion of that alley does not get any improvements. We do improvements on basically the alleyway that is coming off of Magnolia, and it runs kind of behind both those cul-de-sacs up by you. That one gets new sewer and storm, but we do not run, if I remember right, up that alley going to Timberbrook, if we're talking about the same alley. We veer off behind the, the ends of the both cul-de-sacs. Those both get utility improvements, but not the alley leading into Timberbrook. That portion remains as is.
Correct. Basically, the alley that exits Bel Air that runs behind Sweet Gum and Dove Court and Hummingbird Circle, and then kind of circles around Cardinal Circle, I think it is, right, and then exits Magnolia. That's the portion that's being done.
Correct.
Okay, so that's from a schedule standpoint. So that answers that. Mary, I think our last communication in regards to my retaining wall, I believe the letter that was sent in 2019. Obviously, at that time, I think for personal reasons, I really wasn't responding to mail at the time or anything. But at this point in time, knowing that here's where we're at. Before you all start our street, will you be I guess I'm understanding, I haven't seen in the email what a concrete wall should look like. I've gone through the neighborhood to see what that proposed concrete wall should look like. I'm guessing that's what I would be getting if I chose to accept that offer. Is there a specific address I should look at that shows what a proposed concrete wall would look like for my retaining wall?
There is a small one that runs along Live Oak just north of Hollyoak. And I'm not talking, it gets smaller as you go toward the alley. And that's when it's about a foot or less, that's about the size. So it's just a lot shorter. Again, it's dependent. Now, the other ones, if it gets too much shorter, like closer to 6 inches, that's when it sort of kind of looks like a curb that you would see on the street.
Okay. So that being said, okay, if I choose not to get the concrete wall, and in that case, if that's the only option the city offers and I choose not to get it, the city's fine with me putting in my own after the project's over, obviously. Just so I kind of understand my options, I don't think I'm going to go with that, just based on the aesthetics of it. We have such a short street anyway, that, we do have a couple retaining walls here. A lot of them are actually really nice. I think that would be a mistake for me to not, upgrade to look as nice as the other ones here. So that also being said, we do have that short street. I understand the double curbs and there's a purpose behind it. I was just wondering if the city or DDM, I put it in Q&A, I have never seen anything like the double curbing, the short curbs you guys are putting in on other streets. And I understand that it's random because it's the property owner's decision. I was just curious if there is a neighborhood that's in the last 20 years, is this a normal practice that DDM sees in most communities? I see the majority of this type of curb usually on intersections or where ADA curb ramps are really required. I was just curious from an aesthetic standpoint. Obviously, we don't have an HOA here, but I haven't seen anything like this. So I know that there's maybe a soil retention reason, David, I think you explained to me, but is there an example of a neighborhood where this is something that's a norm, or is this a solution because of another reason?
A lot of times it is based on the property, the individual property. I can provide you an example in Fort Worth that it sort of started out near the intersection due to an ADA ramp, but as it progressed around the corner, it was needed because the property owner's elevation was higher, and then it peters out after it, passed a certain grade on their lot. So they actually had kind of like a corner lot, and so it was quite a lengthy little small retaining area, tiny wall. I can shoot you that picture. I do believe I have your email address. I don't mind sending that to you. I thought about pulling the information together, but we struggle with the Zoom meeting a bit. So, but I can send it.
That would be helpful. I guess when I look at it from a and coming from a realtor perspective, I'm not one, but looking at some of the properties I've looked at, this is the only neighborhood I've really seen where in the middle of a neighborhood, there's these random double curbs. And I just wonder, in hindsight, would you all have maybe proposed everyone get a double curb? Would that have made that a blanket aesthetic looking better for our neighborhood overall? Again, it's a hypothetical. Just looking at our short street, I certainly am just vocalizing this because on our short street, having these even though we have retaining walls, they do look very nice. Just having like this one random double curb looks really awkward.
Okay, right now we have some of the double curbs along Live Oak, but they're not because of elevation issues. It's mainly due to the ADA ramps that are required at the T intersections now. And so, you know, it's not like it's holding back massive quantities of soil like there are some lots on Red Wing that have very steep front yards. So, you know, with the changes to the ADA, it just, you know, it's becoming more prevalent than it was in the past. And again, it's not something we want to do all over the place. And, you know, if this was a brand new construction, we could probably monitor it better. But this isn't new construction. We're trying to retrofit existing, you know, redoing the existing infrastructure in our existing right-of-way with the constraints of the existing properties. So it's just, you know, we're trying to make everything work and meet ADA compliance. So unfortunately, you know, we can't avoid it in all cases, but right now we're looking at ways to try to avoid them.
Sure. I appreciate the response on it. It wasn't something when I first bought my house. I'd never heard, and perhaps it was in a presentation in 2017 when I first bought the property. And my mom and I have been at the pre-COVID meetings. I just never had seen the aesthetic that until after it was finished to really fully understand and comprehend the big picture of the project. So now that I'm on the tail end of the street, again, just, you know, again, we're a short street. So just making sure you know, it doesn't look random or this weird random placement in the middle of, a cul-de-sac. But understood, fair enough. I think, Andy, that's all the questions we had, right? And I guess I'll go ahead and make my property improvements April 2022. That sounds good to me.
I'll go ahead and note, Stacy, that you don't want your wall removed and replaced so that when we get to your area, it's not inadvertently done.
I guess I'm going to offer this out if you want to make this note. If you'd rather just tear it down, we'll probably wind up then putting something back up. I don't think you're, you know, more than likely you won't be able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again on that wall. So, so thank you.
The only thing I'll add to that conversation is that, again, as I mentioned, you know, we're trying to give individual homeowners their preferences. You know, and we've had homeowners that you know, it seems like these short retaining walls behind the sidewalk, you know, either people just hate them or they want them, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of in between. So. We've actually had homeowners that, you know, when we've asked them, would you rather us slope your yard back? They said, no, we want the little retaining wall. And so that's what we've done. You know, we had people up on Sweet Gum that didn't want the little retaining wall, so we sloped it back. You know, we're kind of in the business of trying to, you know, make people happy with what's in front of their homes. So, you know, sometimes we have to kind of go with what the people want in front of their own homes. But anyway, enough of that. Let's see.
David, I know Scott and Kathy have had their hand up for a while.
Yeah, I'm getting to them. Yeah, they're the next people. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the mic for Scott and Kathy.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
All right, excellent. With all of the changes in parking, and I don't know exactly who it is that's doing this, but along Timberbrook, we're on the corner of Walnut and Timberbrook. And along Timberbrook, there is an abundant amount of trash being left from looks like maybe lunch or a meal or drinks and bags of
Emptying out the cars.
They're emptying out their vehicles on the grass and on the street there. And I'm wondering if there's something that can at least be said to them about pick up your trash.
Yes, it sounds like something that Matt needs to address with his folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I will address that immediately with them. Absolutely. They know better than to do that stuff. They should be disposing of that stuff. We give them trash bags. We have dumpsters out there that they can put all their food in. I will address that immediately.
That's all we had. The rest is pretty much everything's going like we figured it would go.
Yeah, so far it's been, we have no complaints. Everything's wonderful.
I will add too that I've been with Chris Lee out there a couple of times riding around with him, and you know, when he sees when he personally sees trash and debris like that, especially if it's an excessive amount, he will get on the workers out there and get them to pick it up. In fact, I've seen him actually stop their activities until they got it picked up. So. Yeah, that's definitely something that we need.
Talked with Chris when he was out in this area. We met with him a couple of times, and he
super nice guy.
Yeah, he's on top of it. So
okay.
And good, thanks for after.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Okay, it looks like the next person was Cynthia Span, and I'm going to unmute you here. Okay, just unmute your microphone and you're able to talk, Miss Cynthia Span.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I just moved into the neighborhood a year ago. So it's a year ago this month. So when we moved in, we didn't know any of this was happening. So it's been a little stressful to hear about everybody, you know, on Nextdoor and all that stuff. But I just had a few questions. Okay, so I'm in the middle of the street on Hummingbird, and I do have one of the nice retaining walls with the, you know, stacked landscape stones. So I know you said you would take them out and store them and put them back, which is great. But where are they going to be stored? Because when we moved in, we did a huge amount of work on the property, and we just put in a sprinkler system and we just did new sods. So we don't want those bricks stored on our brand new grass. So where will those bricks be stored?
So typically what we try to do is store them on your property somewhere. We would get with you if there's a place on your property where we can place them that wouldn't harm any of your landscaping or anything like that. That's typically where we try to store those. That way, if we store them in our yard or anything like that, things do get lost, that type of thing. So we try to keep them with the property. So that way we know that that specific stacked brick or whatever it may be goes with your property. So we would work with you on that one. Now, if you don't have a place, you know, what I'd probably do is have them go ahead and throw it on pallets, and then I'll have to shrink wrap that pallet and then just put your address on it, and we'll just tuck it back in the corner of the yard. But typically I like to leave it where the property is. That way things don't get lost, that type of thing. It's a little bit safer that way, but that's something, Cynthia, that we'll work with you on as we approach that that juncture in the project.
Okay, and do you plan on like visiting with each homeowner individually to talk about the project, or I don't know how, I don't know the process since I'm, you know, new.
Sure. So what we do is before we start construction activity on your street is we start giving out notices of, hey, we're coming. We have 6 weeks before we're going to be here, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week. Now, what we put in that letter is basically you'll start to see activity with irrigation capping, as well as anything that is in the parkway being from behind curb to about a foot back of sidewalk. All of that will be obviously taken out. So if you have any pots or anything like that, decorative gnomes or whatever it may be, those need to be removed. And you're responsible for removing those and keeping those safe. If not, we just take them out and you'll never see them again. So we kind of give you a warning, an update. You get our contact information at that point. You'll get to know Chris well, you'll get to know me well, and then we just kind of converse back and forth as you have questions with regards to maybe as we're coming up to your property or anything like that. We are available for those questions. But as far as individual, like specific meetings, unless you request it from us, we don't reach out to you necessarily saying, hey, let's meet, let's talk about this. We let you reach out if you have questions. I'm out there all the time. Chris is out there all the time. and then we'll come up, we'll meet, show you kind of what we're doing. That's what we've been doing with the property owners that have questions of what about this, what about that. We just meet on those specific times as it draws closer, which you will get notification well in advance once the process starts. So.
Okay. Do you know when Hummingbird? I know you said Hummingbird would be complete in January. Do you know when it's going to start?
No. It's gonna be so Hummingbird. Those cul-de-sacs. We're trying to get on. I'm trying to get those cul-de-sacs straight. I always get them mixed up. Hummingbird's the first one before Dove. So we're trying to get on Hummingbird right around the November, December area. You don't have the nice thing about the cul-de-sacs is they don't have storm drain in them. So the amount of utilities that go on those streets, we only get sanitary and water, which both on those streets, if I remember right, are pretty shallow. So they go fairly quick. And they're on opposite sides of the street. So, I mean, we're still a little ways away, being still at the end of August, and we're still a good couple months away from being there. But as we draw closer to that, you will get notifications.
Okay.
And again, a lot of driving factor right now is the concrete supply is really kind of it's made our schedule really kind of wonky in the regard that a lot is driven right now on that availability. So it's a weekly, daily update for us with the city on how the schedule is moving. So that's the best I can tell you right now.
Okay. And I just have one other question. So I said earlier, we just put in a sprinkler system, and the control box is between the street curb and the sidewalk. And this was permitted. So if they're going to pull that out, what's going to happen to our sprinkler system? Like, will that box be put back in after the sidewalk's done, or does it have to be relocated? We paid a lot for the sprinkler system. Is it going to have a lot of repair? Is it going to be working? I don't know how that works.
So I would have to come out and take a look to see where the box is. You're saying it's in the Parkway between the back of curb and the sidewalk. Is that correct? The front sidewalk?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd have to come take a look at it and get our irrigator out there to look at it. Our goal is when we come through, knowing that area is going to be disturbed, because we have to widen the sidewalks per federal requirement, as well as just lane of travel, getting the curb poured for the street, such. I need to come out and take a look at it with our irrigator. We try to keep your irrigation in service on the bulk of your yard. They come out, they cut the cap, they do what they do, and then we take the Parkway out of service. Now, with you having a new irrigation system, you and I need to kind of talk offline because there's some other stuff that we will have to work through to make sure that you are protected with whoever put that irrigation system in, since it is new. So that's something I think as we get closer, Cynthia, we will definitely talk to you, because that's going to be one of the first things when we come out to cap the irrigation. My irrigator is going to say all of her valves are in the Parkway. What do you want us to do? And there's options. We can either move them, or it's stuff that I'll have to work with the city on, because it's not the older systems aren't up to don't have that box in the Parkway that way. So it's something we will address on the side with you. That's the best I can tell you right now. So
okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Okay, it looks like the next one in order is Deanne Collinsworth. Okay, you should be able to speak now.
Hi, I just wanted to say that as a homeowner who's been here a few years, we really appreciate and want to thank the city and DDM, because our sidewalks and streets were getting in terrible shape, and it's worth the wait. And so we'll be excited when it's all completed, just like anybody else. But thank you. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you for the comments. Let's see. The next person is somebody named JV. Go ahead, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I just want to say I received my water bill today, and it's like $80 higher than normal. And about 2 or 3 weeks ago, because I live at on Hollyoak at Timberbrook, right where they just finished putting in the new fire hydrant. Well, when they were digging the hole to put in the fire hydrant, they hit my meter box, and it was spewing water everywhere, and it took them like a good 20 or 30 minutes to get it fixed. So I'm assuming that's why my water bill's so high. So I don't know if I just call the water department, are they going to be like, oh yeah, okay, you know. And I know that my husband I think he emailed Mary when it happened, because we were kind of afraid this was going to happen. So I just didn't know if just calling the water department explaining it is enough, or if you have a suggestion for me.
We can intercede as well. I mean, if we know that that's happened and that there was a water leak because of the construction, you know, if we can help and intercede with our utility billing.
What is the address? And I'll jot it down to make sure that we let them know.
Okay, it's 773 Hollyoak.
Thank you.
And that's it. Thank you for your help, and I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Okay, the next person in line is named Ryan. Go ahead, Ryan, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, guys. I'm just moving into this neighborhood, so I have some really basic questions. I'll probably be pretty quick. We're on Red Wing Drive, and we're curious as to how long the construction takes for our street.
So I'm assuming you moved on to the, you're closer on the Timberbrook side. Did you move into that, was it a yellow house I think I saw for sale, or one kind of towards the Timberbrook side? Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, okay, there's a couple things that are a little bit different with Red Wing that make it beneficial to you guys is the storm drain doesn't run all the way down Red Wing. It picks up at Mockingbird, or I'm sorry, at Magnolia, and then runs to Timberbrook. It's not super deep. It's not super large pipe, so that goes a little bit quicker. The other portion of the storm goes right off of Live Oak. So that doesn't affect you. And then, so it's basically less utilities at a shallower depth, which makes us go quicker. For your street, we're kind of planning roughly about a 2-month timeline, roughly around there. Now that's through and through. That's all activity, all that stuff. So I know that might seem like a lot, but you know, it all depends too on the condition of the existing utilities. We did have one street where the existing utilities were in terrible shape, had a lot of breaks, had a lot of issues with both utilities, the sanitary sewer as well as the water, hence why we're out there doing this work. So that does delay it, but you know, our goal is to get down Red Wing within a couple months to where we are actually, you know, paving and kind of getting you guys put back together. So if I think that answers your question. So I you know, plan on us being out there for a little bit. So
Yes, sir. Thank you. And then I had a follow-up about the retaining wall discussion we've had so far. Has the notice been to the residents about streets, or has that decision not been made?
I'm sorry, do you have an existing retaining wall now?
We don't have an existing one. I was just wondering because they said the elevations were very different on Red Wing. So I was curious if there would be a notice to the previous resident, or if we didn't get one, we shouldn't worry about it.
Typically what ends up happening is Chris will reach out, and I will also check to see if they're the owner or a renter. If I didn't get we'll reach out again to the property owner before we start, demoing or constructing. So if you don't have a retaining wall and it looks like you need one, we'll work with each individual property owner.
Okay. And then the last question was, are we doing the alley on Red Wing between Red Wing and Hummingbird Circle, or is it just Red Wing Drive?
There's only a portion of the alley that's being done behind or north of Red Wing, and that goes from Magnolia. And then once that alley starts turning north, it splits off. The north leg is mostly what we're going to be doing up to just shy of Bel Air. So it won't go to Bel Air. It'll just kind of stop where the cul-de-sac is, roughly in the middle, because we're picking up the sanitary sewer line.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, we have one more hand raised. Stacy and Andy, looks like you want to make another question. Go ahead if you have another question to ask, Stacy.
It's actually really brief, and noticing that with the latest rain, the end of this cul-de-sac and our neighbors on the end of the cul-de-sac have just cleaned up and resodded there. They get a lot of sludge on Hummingbird. And my understanding, this is not as a complicated street as what I heard. But we do get a lot of sludge in the cul-de-sac, and then water, usually in front of our house, pooling quite often. I'm making it a big assumption that this type of scenario we have going on will be addressed on this street, even though it's not as complicated as others. Just want to get clarity on that, because I know our neighbors down on the end, they were saying they constantly have to shovel stuff out of in front of their house. And just kind of curious, will this project take care of that as well?
I know the grades at the end of that cul-de-sac are relatively flat. Sometimes what happens in those older streets is they settle, and it causes that to happen. But sometimes if the street just has a flat grade, it'll happen anyway, even if the street hasn't settled. Mary, I don't know if you have any insight out here with regard to the grades, but if you've got flat grades, and if you've got soil or you've got runoff that goes into the street, you'll probably end up with some silt in the street that needs to be shoveled at least once or twice a year. I have that problem at my house. I have to get out and shovel my curb out about once a year. But
yeah, and like in front of my house, I've had water in front of my house almost all the time.
You shouldn't have standing water. So if you've got standing water, then you're also going to have standing mud. So that's probably a settlement issue.
It is a very flat grade. If there is a settlement issue, it should be addressed. Beyond that, I don't have an answer. I can pose it to my consultant and then update you when I update the the visuals for the small retaining walls.
Appreciate it. Thank you. That's all.
And I should have said that, maybe I did say this earlier, but Mary is taking notes. So, any of these issues that we have to get back with people on, Mary is keeping notes, and so we'll go through those issues one by one and make sure they're all addressed. Well, I don't have any more hands raised. So I do have some questions in the Q&A box. First one is from Jody and Chuck Geisel. It says, if you don't already have any kind of wall but you need one, can we get one? Yes, I mean, if you need a wall, then definitely yes. We're gonna visit with you in person and decide the best way to address that. So in general, the answer is yes.
Jody and Chuck, if you don't mind either calling me or sending me your address so we can look at it closer.
Okay. Let's see. I've got a question. JL, can we have a phone number that will forward to a cell that will be answered for Sid since Chris is on leave? Mary, do you know how we have that set up for Chris? I mean, we should probably be doing the same thing for Sid.
I'm not sure. I'll get with Sid.
You know, I'm thinking maybe Chris has his office or his desk phone forwarded to his cell, and he's given out his desk phone. So maybe that's what we need to do with Sid.
I think Chris has his private. I mean, he has his city cell phone with him, I think, but I'm not sure. Sid.
Mary, he's been texting us regularly, so I believe he's got it somewhere.
Well, one way or another, I guess what we're trying to figure out is a way for a good way for citizens to get a hold of the inspector, whether it's Chris or Sid. Apparently, Chris has something set up that seems to be working, so. Okay, yeah, that's what JL says. That's what I suspected. Chris has his office phone forwarded to his cell. So, Sid, I don't know whether you do have that or not, but that's probably a good idea. Let's see. The next one, Deanne Collinsworth. Several people on Mockingbird and Live Oak, including us, have experienced much higher than normal for this time of year water bills this past cycle. Not sure why. I don't have an answer for you, obviously, this evening. It's something we'll have to look into. If you've got specific addresses, get them to Mary.
I think some of the issue has been they have been doing averaging, and then when the water meters are uncovered and they actually read them, they catch up, and so some people get sticker shock.
Well, we can confirm that with our utility folks and see if maybe that's a little bit of what's happening out there.
But please provide me your address if you're having a higher than normal water bill, or if you want us to investigate it more.
Okay. A clarification on the time frame for Red Wing. Matt mentioned 2 months. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. When you were saying that, I think what I heard you say, Matt, was that that you would be putting down street pavement, where it was drivable within 2 months, but obviously it wasn't going to be sewn up completely.
Correct. It would proceed just kind of like the other streets, the way the utilities fall on that. 2 utilities on one side, 1 utility on the other. We get the 2 utilities on the one side taken care of, get that side paved, do the utility on the opposite side, then pave that side. So same process.
Okay. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A box, so it looks like we're kind of running into the end of our meeting. I did want to say, have just a minute here. If anybody else thinks of anything, do it quick.
David, there was one regarding the storage yard. It was previously green space. We will work with Parks to put it back in service once the construction, once it's no longer needed in that area?
Yeah, we've had some questions about the long-term use of that, and that's really a Parks and Recreation Department question. So if any of you out there have any questions about the long-term use of that area, I would call our Stacy and I, our Parks and Recreation Director, and she can probably speak about that. But yeah, our immediate intention is to simply restore it with grass once DDM has moved their storage yard out of there, and try to put it back in the previous condition. Again, I don't see any new questions. What I was going to mention was, last thing is that the contract for this project, the work days run out sometime in August of 2022. You know, obviously, I think this is a fair statement. We're not as far along as we're hoping we would be at this point, but I think we're far enough along that there's no reason why this project cannot be finished by the contract date next August. So, you know, I think we're still in a good space in terms of time. You know, as we mentioned, you know, of course, you know, we don't have crystal balls. We don't know what concrete's going to do in the next few months. You know, we can only hope that the supply and demand problem becomes better. So we're just going to have to keep our eyes on it. But at this point, it does not appear there is any reason that we're going to, you know, run over days on this project. So anyway, I still don't see any new questions. So at this point, I think we're going to log off and just continue to contact the inspector or Mary or Matt if you see him, and I'm available if they're not. So, you know, thanks for joining us this evening.